What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Game Chamber. And today we have huge monumental news to talk about. Microsoft and Xbox have put in a bid to acquire Activision and Blizzard, two of the biggest and most popular game publishers and developers out there. And this is by far the biggest company acquisition that has ever happened in the gaming industry. And ever since this news dropped on Tuesday, I have seen nothing but social media posts and articles and tweets of everybody on many different stances on what this is going to do to the gaming industry, what this is going to do for Xbox, what this is going to do as far as how it affects PlayStation. And I wanted to give my take on not only how and why Xbox is doing this, what maybe their plans are going to be, but what I think Sony should do and what they will do in response to this. Now, of course, it goes without saying that this acquisition is not written in stone. There's still a lot of things that have to be done legally and through the government to make sure that there's not monopoly or antitrust issues with this acquisition. It's probably going to be in the later half of 2023 before we see this penciled in, before the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and before we see any kind of impact to Activision and Blizzard or the gaming industry as a whole. Aside from the fact that Sony's stock dropped quite a bit yesterday after this news dropped. So to give you an idea of how huge of an acquisition this is, Microsoft put in a bid of $68.7 billion to acquire Activision and Blizzard. For comparison's sake, one of the biggest company acquisitions that we have seen in a long time, just a couple of years ago when Disney bought out Fox, that was for $71 billion. Just a couple more pennies as far as these billion-dollar corporations go, and maybe Microsoft could have bought Fox themselves. So by far the biggest pile of money that has been dropped on the table to acquire some game studios. And just not even a year ago, Microsoft also purchased Bethesda, which came along with Doom and the Elder Scrolls games and Fallout, and that itself seemed like a giant acquisition. It was very clear that Xbox is trying to acquire as many studios, as many companies, and as many video game properties as they can, probably to fill out their Game Pass software. For the maybe 5 of you out there that don't know what Game Pass is, this is essentially a video game streaming service and a video game subscription service that Xbox has implemented in this generation that works both on Xbox last generation and this generation, as well as PC. And it's essentially like Netflix for video games. You pay a certain amount per month, which right now is like $14 a month, I think. I could be wrong on that, but it's pretty fucking affordable. And you get hundreds of games available to you to not only download and play on your system for as long as they're on Game Pass, but also through cloud gaming, which for the little bit that I've experienced it is actually pretty damn good and works very well. Now, for as huge as the Bethesda acquisition seemed, Activision and Blizzard have even more of a prestigious lineup of video game software and video game properties. You've got Call of Duty being the biggest one. They've got World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Overwatch, which is quickly becoming a gigantic IP. You even have classic PlayStation mascots in Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon that will be now owned by Xbox. That's insane to even think about. And the biggest question on everybody's minds in regard to all of these video game properties is exclusivity. Is Xbox going to make all of these properties that up until now have pretty much all been third party and have been on all platforms, are they going to make that Xbox and PC exclusive? And we're not going to know until it happens or it doesn't happen. Now, there have already been articles out there where Phil Spencer, the guy who leads Xbox, is saying that they have no plans on pulling these properties away from all of the different platforms out there, that they know that the fan base is already very dedicated and they love these games and they don't want to rip them away from anybody. But they also said something very similar when they acquired Bethesda, and it's now become clear that Bethesda software, all of their properties are going to be Xbox exclusive, with the exceptions of the ones that already have written contractual obligations. So you gotta have to take that with a boulder of salt. Is it possible that they know that Call of Duty and Overwatch and video game properties like that are going to be much more lucrative for them if they just let them go on PlayStation and they just reap all of the financial benefits? Yes. Is it also beneficial for them to drop $70 billion on something so that they can take it away from PlayStation and say, if you love these properties, you got to buy an Xbox, you got to be a Game Pass subscriber to be able to play it? Yes. So there's no way to predict whether or not they're going to do that. I tend to think, especially given the way that they have done with the Bethesda stuff already, that it's probably going to be Xbox exclusive as soon as it's able to. They've said that they're going to keep some things multi-platform and some things exclusive. To me, some things means the biggest things are going to be on Xbox, like Call of Duty, like Overwatch, and games that might be a little bit smaller properties, a little bit less lucrative, will probably be able to spread the wealth over onto PlayStation. But again, this is nothing but speculation. We won't know until they say yes or no. Now, going along with that, there's already been some articles released just today where some of the people high up in Sony have already stated that regardless of this acquisition, you're still going to be able to play Call of Duty and some of the other Activision and Blizzard properties on PlayStation because there's already contractual obligations with that. There's already been years already written in stone that PlayStation is supposed to have the ability to have Call of Duty games and even some exclusive pieces of those Call of Duty games on the PlayStation. Whether or not that's going to change once those deals run out, whether or not the validity of those deals is going to be called into question, again, we won't know until we know. But I tend to think that even if PlayStation already has a deal where through 2027 they're allowed to do Call of Duty, as soon as 2028 hits, I tend to think Xbox is going to rip it from them and put it on Game Pass and Xbox and PC exclusively. But we'll see. Now, the other little detail that's very interesting to talk about is that if in fact Xbox does have plans to make games like Call of Duty, properties like Call of Duty, Xbox and PC exclusive, that's going to make them run into a lot more issues regarding getting this acquisition approved and not stepping on the toes of the government in regards to monopoly and antitrust concerns. There's already been industry experts that have talked about this, saying that specifically Call of Duty, if they put into their acquisition deal that eventually they're going to rip that from Sony, that's going to make this a lot harder of a deal for them to get passed through the government. So that's also something that's very valid to talk about. I would go out on a limb and say that Call of Duty and all of the money and fans that come along with that and potential Game Pass subscribers is probably 95% the reason why they wanted to acquire Activision and Blizzard, regardless of all the other great popular properties that they have. Call of Duty every single year is always the highest selling game of the holiday season of the year. It's no question whatsoever that was what they had their sights set on. So whatever their plans with Call of Duty are, that's going to be probably the defining factor of how they go about this acquisition and whether or not it gets approved by the government. Now, as far as how this acquisition, if and when it goes through, is going to affect Xbox, how it's going to affect Game Pass, even before this acquisition, I have said multiple times, just in the short amount of time that I've actually owned an Xbox Series X and S and been a Game Pass subscriber, that eventually one of two things, or potentially both, is going to happen to Game Pass. They're either going to hike the hell out of the price of Game Pass, because right now it's almost scary how affordable it is for the amount of content that you have available to you, or eventually they're going to taper back on all of the day one releases. Games like Halo Infinite, games like the next Gears sequel, like Forza, potentially Call of Duty, whatever they get that's going to be exclusive. I think that they're going to start hiking back on either the amount or cut it off altogether, that you're not going to be able to get that day one, maybe a month later. Very similar to the experiment that HBO Max did last year, where they're saying all of our new releases, you can watch it day one on HBO Max. And then they saw the drop in profit and said, fuck that, take your ass back to the theater. I think it's going to be very similar to that. They are putting things like Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5 day one on Game Pass because they want as many people as possible to subscribe to Game Pass, because they know that the level of awesomeness and the level of affordability and the amount of content available to you once you become a Game Pass subscriber and have experienced Game Pass, that even if they start to take away things like day one releases, the vast majority of us are going to stick with Game Pass and still be a subscriber. So one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to start paying $30, $40 a month for this service, or they're going to take away the day one releases like the big third-party games or the big first-party games like Halo and Call of Duty and Fallout, whatever other things they're going to make exclusive to Xbox and Game Pass. Maybe if they're crazy, they'll do both, but one of them at least is going to happen. Now, getting into the meat of this topic, me as somebody that I like both consoles. I like both companies. I think they both have their pros, they both have their cons, and at the end of the day, provided that this does not take Sony off of the chessboard completely, it's not really going to matter much to me, because if I want to play Call of Duty, of which I'm not really that big of a fan of anyway, I'll already have an Xbox, so it's not like I'm going to be missing out. So really, it's just the people that are Sony exclusive, or unfortunately those that can only afford to buy one console, are now going to be put in a little bit of a pickle if they decide to make some of these huge popular properties exclusive. But what does Sony do in response to this? As somebody that tends to prefer Sony's first-party games, I think that there's a pretty strong argument that even if they do nothing, Sony's going to be just fine. I mean, they still have, in my opinion, and I would say in the popular opinion, they have more exclusive first-party games that are critically and fan acclaimed than any other company in this industry, and I would almost say including Nintendo, that they're going to be just fine. They're still going to have God of War, they're still going to have Uncharted, they're still going to have Last of Us, they're still going to have Horizon, all of these properties that they're continuously creating and knocking it out of the park with. But I do think they're going to do something. So what are they going to do? Obviously, they've already been talking about some kind of a Game Pass competitor. I think it was called Project Spartacus or something. And I'm sure within the next month or two, we're going to get a lot more solid details about what that's going to be. I don't think they're going to put day one releases on there like Game Pass, but they definitely need to do some kind of a subscription service to compete with the Game Pass model. That's just inevitable. So right then and there, they're going to have to fast track that service if they're going to stay competitive with what Xbox is doing. Beyond that, though, I do think that they need to start looking at some video game publishers and some video game companies to acquire. Now, they have acquired some smaller companies throughout the years, companies that definitely make very fan-acclaimed games. If I'm not mistaken, they just acquired, or at least got a partnership with Housemarque not too long ago, the guys that brought us Returnal. I believe they just did Hades. Like, they're a very popular video game company that's kind of on the rise. Correct me down below if I'm wrong about that. I'm sure I can get details skewed, but they have gained partnership or acquisition with very, very prominent video game software companies. I mean, hell, From Software, people that make the Dark Souls games and Bloodborne and Sekiro, they've had quite a few PlayStation exclusive properties. So PlayStation tends to be somebody that has a lot of goodwill and a lot of good faith from a lot of these video game publishers in the industry, and I think they're going to continue to have that regardless of how many people Microsoft gobbles up. But there are some companies that I think that they should probably look into acquiring. Now, of all of the video game companies that are out there right now that they maybe should have their eye on, the biggest one that everybody's been talking about is Ubisoft. Now, I don't know the financials. I don't know how much money Sony has available to spend. I don't know how much some of these video game publishers and companies are going to cost. So I'm not getting into any of that. I'm literally just talking about properties that are out there that aren't necessarily owned by either company, Xbox or PlayStation, that maybe they should look into if it's financially viable for them to do that. And Ubisoft is probably the one that would cost the most of all the ones that I'm going to talk about, certainly along with Take-Two. Now, Ubisoft obviously are the ones that bring us Assassin's Creed. They bring us games like, Splinter Cell and Prince of Persia, even though they haven't done those properties in years, and we're waiting on a new Splinter Cell, but still very big properties there. They also do Far Cry, very popular, Rainbow Six, very popular, Ghost Recon. I mean, they have a lot of properties out there, and if either of these companies was able to acquire Ubisoft, that would be a huge get, because has there been a system released within the past 3 generations that have not launched with an Assassin's Creed game? I mean, I think that those things are starting to really kind of run out of steam, but Assassin's Creed is a gigantic property. Far Cry is becoming a gigantic property. Rainbow Six, that's a game that we just got. Rainbow Six, was it Extraction that was released, and Rainbow Six Siege has been wildly successful and popular. Watch Dogs that is underneath them, that's a property that's starting to gain some steam. So a lot of huge properties to get with Ubisoft. Take-Two, they got Grand Theft Auto. Either of these companies that are able to grab Take-Two, that would shake up this industry quite a bit. I mean, if Sony bought Take-Two, and now you had to be a Sony PlayStation owner to be able to play Grand Theft Auto going forward, that would be massive. That's about the only thing that I can think of that would make this Call of Duty acquisition almost seem like it pales in comparison. Obviously, Call of Duty sells more because they come out with a new game every fucking year, but Grand Theft Auto is a humongous behemoth in the video game industry. Now, some smaller companies that they could look into, I think the obvious one here is Konami. I mean, Konami's not doing shit. Konami has lost a lot of goodwill and a lot of steam in the gaming industry, and they're holding on to properties like Metal Gear Solid, like Castlevania. I don't imagine that it would take a ton of money to buy a company like that that has these massive, huge fan-acclaimed properties and is literally just sitting on them, not doing anything. To me, that would be the obvious one to go to first. I don't know what it would cost, but having Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill, some kind of a revival of Silent Hill and Castlevania, but especially Metal Gear Solid as PlayStation exclusive, that would be a gigantic acquisition. Even companies like Capcom. Now, Capcom's pretty healthy because of Resident Evil, but they got Resident Evil. Could you imagine if you had to be a PlayStation user to play Resident Evil going forward? Right now, when arguably the Resident Evil brand is stronger than it's ever been, especially since it started back in the 90s, that would be a gigantic one. They've also got Monster Hunter. I've never played it, but it seems to be pretty popular as well. But that one right there, look into that one. I mean, Konami or Capcom, either of those. If Sony announced within the next couple of months that they were buying those, fans would go nuts. Another big one that I've read has actually been trying to get acquired. They're trying to sell off their video game division is Warner Brothers Interactive. I mean, you know, Warner Brothers has been kind of shaken up with the HBO Max thing, and they've been acquired by another company here recently, and they've been trying to sell off their video game division, which has some pretty huge properties on it. I mean, you've got any Middle-earth game. I believe Harry Potter would also be in that, which they got Harry Potter Legacy coming out that's across both platforms. That's going to be a huge game provided that it actually is quality. You've got the Arkham universe games, all of the Batman stuff. Any DC property I would imagine would fall into that as well, like Injustice, or if they ever decided to do a Superman game or whatever the hell else with those properties. I mean, PlayStation is knocking it out of the fucking park right now with Marvel games, with the Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Everybody is over the moon excited for Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. And if they had DC and Marvel properties only on PlayStation, the comic book genre and the comic book properties are massive right now. Could you imagine one company holding both of the cards of Marvel and DC? Warner Brothers even has Mortal Kombat and the Lego games, which I never played the Lego games, but I'll be damned if those things aren't successful as hell. I mean, that's one of the most popular video game properties for kids out there. My point is, there is still a lot of video game companies out there that maybe aren't on the level of behemoth size that Activision and Blizzard are, but still would be gigantic seismic shifts in the video game industry if Sony was able to acquire them. And the other thing that needs to be said too is, who's to say at some point Sony doesn't get bought by somebody? Who's to say that Amazon or Netflix or Apple at some point doesn't look at Sony and go, "Aw, you cute little video game company that can just like a little engine that could. Mine!" So when that happens, if that happens, and it wouldn't take a lot, I think they're only worth like $250 billion, where somebody like Microsoft is in the trillions. That right there would open up a gigantic change in what Sony is able to do, what PlayStation is able to do. I mean, if Apple or Amazon or Netflix takes over Sony, that just makes the bankroll of being able to buy all these other companies so much easier. So nonetheless, we're going to see some big shifts in the video game war, console war, content war, whatever the hell you want to call it. A lot of us that are smart and are able to enjoy both, like myself, not really going to be affected too much as long as one of them doesn't get knocked off the chessboard completely. But regardless, the moves that Xbox is making, acquiring all of these content properties and all of these publishers and all of these big franchises within the video game industry is going to do nothing but put the pressure on Sony and either make them much more competitive as a company or possibly even just make them more creative as publishers themselves. I mean, who's to say that they don't go like, all right, take Call of Duty. Go ahead, take Overwatch, because we're going to develop an awesome first-person shooter franchise that's going to knock it out of the fucking park within our first-party studios that's going to be able to compete with all of that. Who's to say they won't take that approach? Whether they succeed with it, we'll see, but they could have the balls to do that. Go ahead, take it. We got it. We're good. So, what do you guys think? What do you think about the Xbox acquiring Activision and Blizzard? What do you think about exclusivity? Do you think it's going to go to Xbox, or do you think they're going to spread the wealth and just take all of the money and laugh all the way to the bank? And what do you think Sony could or should do in response to this? Let me know down below and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button. This is only my second video on this channel, but we're going to get a lot more. All of my video game content from now on, be it reviews, rankings, live streams, news videos like this, any of that is going to be exclusive to this channel and no longer on my main channel. If you're finding me on this channel, I do have a much bigger and a much more seasoned YouTube channel where I talk mostly about movies, horror films. I've talked about video games in the past, but all of that content, I'll have the link for that channel down below. Please become a subscriber to both if you enjoy my content, if you enjoy my opinion. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, remember, the Game Chamber is Commander Shepard's favorite channel on the YouTubes.